Okay, so you want to own a funeral home, and honestly, the pitch writes itself. Demand is guaranteed, around 3 million customers a year in America. Every year. No recession, no season, no changing consumer taste can touch that number. Your customers never comparison shop, almost never negotiate, and have never once asked for a refund. The markup on your flagship product can run 300, 400, sometimes 500%. On paper, this might be the most perfectly designed business on earth, and it is dying. Not the customers, the business. By the end of this video, you will understand why the family name on your local funeral home sign might belong to a family that sold out years ago to a corporation that paid extra to keep the sign exactly the way it was. You will understand why this is one of the only retail businesses in America with its own dedicated federal law. You will understand why you can legally buy a casket at Costco and the funeral home is required to accept it. And you will understand how an industry with more customers coming than at any point in history is somehow watching its business model evaporate. Let's start with getting in, because unlike an IKEA or a Sam's Club, this one you can actually buy. There are 15,401 funeral homes in the United States, and roughly 75% of them are family or privately owned, run by aging owners whose kids often want nothing to do with the profession. That makes this one of the great generational buyout markets in America. But before you write a check, understand what you're buying into. This is a licensed profession. In most states, you need a mortuary science degree, a multi-year apprenticeship, and a funeral director's license before you're allowed to arrange a single service. And the business you'd buy is small in a way the death industry's reputation hides. The average NFDA member funeral home handles around 113 cases a year. One family every 3 days. At the median price of a full funeral, that's a business grossing somewhere around $900,000 a year, out of which comes the building, the vehicles, the staff, the insurance, and being on call at 3 a.m. on Christmas forever, because death does not schedule appointments. This is not passive income. It is the least passive income imaginable. Now, the economics of the actual sale, because this is where the funeral home stops being a small business and becomes something much stranger. The median cost of a funeral with viewing and burial in America is $8,300 and closer to $10,000 once you add the vault most cemeteries require. And that price exists inside a market unlike any other in retail. Your customer is grieving, exhausted, and on a deadline. They will make a 5-figure purchasing decision within about 48 hours, often before they've slept, usually without comparing a single competitor. Because calling 3 funeral homes for quotes while your mother is in a hospital morgue feels obscene. Every rule of careful customer behavior is suspended. And for most of the 20th century, the industry priced accordingly. The casket is the famous example. An item that wholesales for a few hundred to a bit over $1,000 and retails in the showroom for several thousand, with industry analyses putting typical markups in the range of 300 to 500%. The markup was the business model, and the casket is only the anchor of a much longer receipt. The non-declinable basic services fee that every family pays just for the funeral home's overhead, the embalming, the viewing room by the hour, the hearse, the limousine, the flowers, the obituary placement, the memorial cards, each a line item, each purchased in the same 48-hour window by the same exhausted customer, stacking a few $100s at a time on top of a 4-figure box, which is exactly why in 1984 the federal government stepped in. It's called the funeral rule, and the fact that it exists tells you everything about what came before it. FTC investigations in the late 1970s documented an industry where families were told embalming was legally required when it wasn't, where prices came only in bundles you couldn't unbundle, and where the funeral home held a near monopoly on the casket. So the rule forced open the books. Every funeral home in America must hand you an itemized price list, must quote prices over the phone, must let you decline embalming where the law allows it, and most beautifully, must accept a casket you bought anywhere else without charging a handling fee. That is why Costco sells caskets. That is why you can order one online tonight and have it shipped to the funeral home, and the funeral director is legally required to treat it like one of his own. Violations today can cost up to $53,000 each. And yet, one gap survived 4 decades of regulation. Funeral homes still are not required to post prices on their websites. The price list is mandatory. Putting it where you'd actually look before walking in is not. But here's the mechanism most people have never heard of, and it's where the real money moved. The industry's favorite customer is one who hasn't died yet. It's called preneed. You sit down, healthy, maybe 68 years old, and you buy your own funeral in advance. At today's prices, paid into a trust or an insurance policy that the funeral home collects when the time comes. In 2024 alone, Americans bought more than 535,000 preneed policies with a face value over $3 billion. And at industry scale, it becomes staggering. The largest funeral company in the world is sitting on a preneed backlog of roughly $17 billion, an entire mountain of funerals that have been sold but not yet performed. Think about what that does to the business. Demand stops being something you wait for and becomes something you harvest decades early. Revenue becomes predictable in the one industry where the timing of every sale, by definition, unknowable. A funeral home with a strong preneed book isn't really a funeral home anymore. It's a financial institution whose payout happens to be a casket. Which brings us to the sign out front and the company behind the curtain. In 1962, a Houston man named Robert Waltrip, who had grown up working in his family's funeral home, started buying other funeral homes. His instinct was pure logistics. Funeral homes in the same city could share hearses, embalming facilities, and staff, clustering the expensive parts while each location kept its own chapel and its own name. That company became Service Corporation International, and today SCI operates roughly 1,500 funeral homes and 500 cemeteries across 44 states, services over 700,000 families a year, generates more than $4 billion in annual revenue, and controls an estimated 15 to 16% of the entire North American death care market. And it got there the hard way. During the 1990s buying frenzy, SCI ballooned to more than 4,500 locations across 20 countries on 5 continents, discovered that even death has limits as a growth stock, and spent years selling most of it back off before rebuilding around one market it never doubted: the American funeral. And here is the detail that changes how you'll see your own town. When SCI buys a beloved local funeral home, it usually keeps the family name on the sign. The founder can be 20 years gone, the profits flowing to a Houston-headquartered public company, and the sign still says the same reassuring surname it said in 1965. That is not laziness. That is the strategy. In this industry, family-owned is the most single valuable brand attribute. So, the corporation's smartest move is to be invisible. The consolidation of American death care happened in plain sight, one unchanged sign at a time. So, there's your playbook. Buy the trust of a family name. Harvest demand early through preneed, cluster the costs, keep the markups. Except the entire machine was built on one assumption. And that assumption is collapsing. The assumption was the casket. In 1960, roughly 96% of Americans were buried. This year, 63.4% of Americans who die will be cremated. And the National Funeral Directors Association projects that by 2045, the cremation rate hits 82.3%, with burial down to 13. Cremations will outnumber burials 6 to 1. A ratio this country has never seen. And cremation doesn't just change the ceremony, it deletes the invoice. A full funeral with burial, $8,300 median, before the vault and the plot. A funeral with cremation and a service, $6,280. A direct cremation. No viewing, no ceremony, body to crematory, remains returned in a simple container, around $2,200. Arranged increasingly online, sometimes without the family ever entering the building. The customer didn't disappear. The customer downgraded from the 5-figure package to the product that pays the least. Run that math on the funeral home you were about to buy. That average home doing 113 calls a year grosses close to $900,000 in an all-burial world. At today's cremation mix, the same 113 families produce meaningfully less. And in a 2035 world where 80% choose cremation and most of those chose the direct kind, industry projections put that same home's revenue at roughly $300,000. Same building, same staff, same 3 a.m. phone calls, 1/3 of the money. This is why the number of funeral homes in America has fallen from more than 22,000 a couple of decades ago to about 15,400 today, and why the survivors are scrambling to become something else. Around 30% of funeral homes now operate their own crematory to at least keep the cremation dollars in-house. Half now offer live-streamed services, and the trade press is full of chapels being rebranded as celebration of life venues because the industry has finally understood that it was never really selling boxes, it was selling gatherings. And here is the cruelest twist in the whole story. Business has never been better on paper. America is aging. And annual deaths are projected to rise 26% over the next 2 decades to nearly 4 million a year by 2045. The funeral industry is the only industry in America whose total addressable market is growing with demographic certainty, while its revenue per customer is in structural freefall. More customers than ever, each one worth less than ever. Guaranteed demand, it turns out, was never the same thing as a guaranteed business. So look at what you'd actually own. A licensed small business grossing under $1 million on call every night of the year, selling a median $8,300 product to customers who are legally protected by a federal rule written specifically because of how this industry once treated them. A preneed book that makes you part funeral director, part trust fund manager, a family name on the sign that is worth more than the building, which is exactly why a $4 billion corporation might one day offer to buy it from you and change nothing but the ownership, and a core product, the American burial, that the market is abandoning at the fastest rate ever recorded, even as the customers line up in record numbers. There are about 15,400 funeral homes in America right now, 3/4 of them still family-owned, most of them for sale sooner than their owners admit, all of them caught between a $17 billion backlog of funerals already sold and a future where 4 out of 5 customers choose the $2,200 option. The name on the sign is the asset, the preneed trust is the bank. The casket showroom is the past, and the funeral home you'd be buying is either the last great generational bargain in American small business, or a building full of hearses in a country that stopped needing the parade. You decide.